So good morning again, and welcome to today's webinar, Understanding and Responding to Dementia-Related Behavior, presented by Joon Her of the Alzheimer's Association. My name is Natalia Rodriguez, and I am the Bilingual Education Specialist here at PSS Circle of Care. For those of you who are new to us, PSS is an innovative multi-service agency whose mission is to strengthen the capacity of older New Yorkers, their families, and communities to thrive. PSS Circle of Care provides free support services for those caring for someone who is frail, chronically ill, or is experiencing memory loss, and for families where a grandparent or a family member other than a parent is raising a grandchild. The free services that we offer are consultations, support groups, education and training such as this one, wellness events, respite opportunities, supplemental services, information assistance, and advocacy. For further information about PSS and the services we provide, please contact us via the email or the phone number that will be posted on the chat box shortly. Just as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our resources page at pssusa.org/events and on our YouTube channel. Should any questions come up during the presentation, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A section of your screen for an opportunity to have them answered by our panelists during the Q&A portion of our event. So without further ado, we are joined this morning once again by Mr. Joon Her of the Alzheimer's Association. Joon, thank you so much for joining us again. Welcome, and I'll turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And welcome again to all of you today. Here we go. Let me go and share my screen. And should be popping up right about now. There we go. So yes, today, actually before we get to today, I should quickly introduce myself. My name is Joon. I'm the program manager here at the Alzheimer Association New York City chapter. Do a lot of these education programs. I do a lot of speaking about different topics with Alzheimer's dementia, and do also care consultations, different referrals, and all the good stuff. So today's topic for discussion is going to be understanding and responding to dementia-related behaviors. And for today's program, it's going to be very interactive. So we might need to use the chat box a little bit because we're going to do a lot of the kind of taking an example, and then we're going to see what are some things that we notice, what are some action steps that we want to take with this example, and how we can kind of go about those different situations, right? Now, of course, again, if you have any questions, please utilize your chat box and also the Q&A button that should be either on the top or the bottom of your screen. Great. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at what we're going to discuss today. All righty. So by the end of today's program, you will be able to, 1, identify common triggers for behaviors associated with dementia, 2, explain the process for assessing and identifying challenging behaviors, and 3, we're going to list strategies to address common dementia-related behaviors. All right, so our first topic is, many of these behavioral changes, they do have triggers, right? So some of these behavioral symptoms, they might be caused by, physical discomfort. For example, they could be because of fatigue. Maybe there's hunger, thirst, right? Maybe there's constipation or a full bladder, or maybe the room temperature is just really uncomfortable for them, right? So also those behaviors, they might be triggered by overstimulation, sadness, or boredom, right? Isolation also could contribute to that, or even just changes in the routine or living situations, right? Or sudden changes that might also trigger some behavioral changes. So of course, when we talk about these causes, the causes might be hard to sort out sometimes, but it's also really helpful to take the steps that we're going to outline in the next few slides right? To really understand and respond to those needs that are expressed through the behaviors. So we're going to present an outline of these steps to take, and then we're going to apply those steps to the most challenging behaviors that, many caregivers they commonly face. Great. So today we're going to explore how to understand and also address those common dementia-related behaviors by using these the 4-step process, right? So number 1, we got detect and connect. Number 2, we got address physical needs first. Number 3, then we're going to then address emotional needs. And then 4, we're going to reassess and plan for next time. So our first step, and we're going to go into each of the steps in more detail. Number 1, detect and connect, right? So the first step in understanding and addressing these behaviors is really to detect and connect by joining that person in their reality, right? So that what that means when we're talking about joining their reality, right, is seeing the world through their eyes rather than your own, right? So when we remember, right, that this behavior is a form of communication, we know that if we could see the world through the eyes of the person with dementia, and if we experience what they experience in the way that they do, right, that behavior will make much more sense, right? And since they are the ones with disease, we can't really expect them to just really accommodate our needs, right? Instead, we must try to enter their worlds, right? Connect with them as they are, right? And we got to do our best to do our detective work and decode what they are expressing, right? Sometimes we simply, unfortunately, can't figure out where that behavior is coming from or what the person is communicating through that behavior, right? However, it is our job as caregivers to make, as many attempts or every attempt to just really understand the behavior before intervening so that we can know how to help, right? So really to understand the behavior, all right, you might have to start with some detective work, like I said, right? And try to determine the trigger for that behavior. So you might ask yourself, right, who, what, where, when, how, right? So who was present when that behavior took place, what, right? What happened just before the behavior began, or what were you doing, or someone else, what was someone else doing before that behavior began, right? The where did the behavior take place? What was the person seeing, hearing, and touching, right? When does this behavior tend to occur, right? Sometimes there might be a specific time of day when that behavior takes place. Right? And the how did you react? And then we want to connect with the person as you assess the situation, right? So we want to approach the person calmly and respectfully, right? So really approach the person with respect and just really treat them as how you would like to be treated in that same situation. So we always want to begin by coming to the person from the front, right? And identify yourself if necessary, right? So the reason why we're always wanting to come to a person with Alzheimer's dementia from the front is because if we startle them by tapping them on the back, right, they might be lost in their thoughts. And then once they get startled, that might trigger some anger, frustration, right? Or they might be even more confused. So we always want to approach the person from the front, identify yourself, right? Saying, hey, Dad, it's your son, Joon. What would you want? What do you want for lunch, right? And then also we want to move to their physical level and use eye contact, right? And body language to really convey that friendly approach, right? So for example, if they are seated, right, we're going to want to match their eye level, right? So we want to either kneel down or have a seat next to them, right? We don't want to look down on the person because that could kind of feel like an authoritative figure, right? Kind of like a boss figure, right? So it might be intimidating. So we always want to, again, match their eye level, right? Take a seat, take a knee, right? Or have that. Oop, there we go. Sorry, my computer just froze for a second. There we go. All right. So yes. All right. So our next step, right? So that was step one. Step two is address the person's physical needs, right? So you always want to begin by exploring any needs that might be related to any physical pain or a medical condition, right? So you definitely want to consult a physician to really identify any causes that might be related to any new medications, any pre-existing medications, or any pre-existing medical conditions, right, or illness. We also want to always note any signs of injury too, right, due to any incidents, maybe like a recent fall. And we always want to consult with the person's physician with any questions or concerns too. So people with Alzheimer's disease, they might also often experience pain from an undiagnosed UTI, a urinary tract infection, or maybe compression fractures, arthritis, right? If they're wearing dentures, maybe the dentures are kind of poorly fitting now, indigestion, constipation, and other medical conditions too, right? In addition to that, right, behaviors, they might change due to those, undiagnosed conditions, and also to new medication or interaction between several medications too, right? Of course, their needs, they might not be recognized due to that person's, inability to recognize or even talk about their symptoms. So we will always want to be sure to know any unusual behaviors or symptoms and report them promptly. We want to report as soon as possible to the person's doctor for treatment, or also to rule out any medical causes of the person's pain. Now, of course, secondly, we also want to check for physical discomforts due to those, environmental triggers or issues. For example, right, restrictive clothing, right? There's lighting problems, it's too bright, it's too dark. Maybe there's a glare from the sun that's constantly in their eyes as they're seated, right? Or maybe that uncomfortable room temperature, right? Some other common causes of discomfort that can also include, again, the hunger, thirst, maybe the need to stretch and move, the need to use the bathroom, the room being too bright or too dark, right? Maybe it's too noisy or just too quiet, right? Maybe they're being in an uncomfortable position or just too much distractions and commotion, right? So when you do identify those causes of discomfort, we do want to adjust the environment as needed so that the person can feel more comfortable, right? So again, we want to address those physical needs. Great. And then step three, we want to address the emotional needs, right? Think about how the situation is going to feel to the person, right? And that's usually that basis for their behavioral reaction too, right? Then we're going to focus on those feelings in your response instead on the facts of the situation, right? We're going to talk more about this later as we use the examples too, right? But we also want to avoid correcting people, right? Even if what they say is inaccurate, right? Remember that you are trying to connect with them with where they are, or we're trying to join their reality, right? So just telling them they are wrong over and over, no, that's wrong, no, no. Can you tell me that again? If we start quizzing them, criticizing them, right? Then I feel like then that will only escalate the situation and just really convey that you don't understand what they understand, right? Then they will just try even harder to convince you and, of course, get more upset, right? So, for example, right now, or at least where I am right now, it's New York City, and it's 2023, right? So, for example, if my father with Alzheimer's kept saying, "Oh, we're back in California in 1973," right? Sometimes you just gotta let them have it. Say, "Yeah, we're in California in 1973. what do you want for lunch, right? We want to agree. Sometimes we just gotta let them have it, but we also want to focus on that action step, right? We want to let them have it, tell them yes, right? Give them the emotional empathy, and then move on with the action plan, right? The small details versus the big action plan, you can see where that weighs, right? Also letting the person know that you are with them and that you're safe together, right? Reinforcing that you're there to help and that you will try to make those changes to make the person more comfortable. That is also very important, right? So, although you might not understand exactly what that exact meaning of the person's message may be, right? You can usually identify that feeling behind the behavior. So we want to address the emotion behind the behavior to really help the person feel less overwhelmed and alone, right? And finally, help the person redirect some of that energy that they're expressing through a more soothing activity, right? Something that is something that would be very soothing and enjoyable together, right? Such as going for a walk in a park, eating lunch together, etc. Great. So before we go into step number 4, here's a quick video with Rose, who's going to talk about redirecting some of her mother's agitation into activities that kept her engaged.
She was part of the family. She'd fold towels, and she'd fold towels all day long some days. Just, put them back in the basket, and then she'd give them to her, here's some more towels. And it may sound like it's cruel, but look, it kept her busy. It kept her movements going. It kept her, just kept her occupied, and it made her feel wanted and that she was contributing. We created a routine for her that worked for her around her agitation and, her sleep patterns. So every day she was in the same routine for the most part. And every day she did something. She was always in the kitchen every day helping do something. Sometimes she'd rinse dishes, but she was always near the kitchen sink because she spent most of her life in front of the kitchen sink. Now she was just doing it in different ways. And going for a walk, going out in the car for a drive, walking around the yard, watering plants. Those are all things that she did, and we just had her continue doing them.
Absolutely. So just kind of how we heard from the video, right? So Rose did talk about creating those activities that allow her mother to stay busy, right? Channel her energy into tasks, right? Keeping a routine that worked for her, also while continuing to contribute and feel needed, right? With those different tasks. Great. So our fourth step, number 4, right, is to reassess and plan for the next time, right? Again, we're going to go back to detecting and connecting and enjoying the person's reality. So we might want to reflect on, right, how does that situation look now to the person with dementia, right? Do you maybe need to explore other potential causes and solutions? And if so, right, what can you do differently next time? Right? Once you settled on those interventions that are effective, right, we want to recognize that, of course, this type of issue may arise again, right? So you want to always plan to reassess at those different periodic intervals. And your intervention plan that might also include, right, how to recognize those signs of the issue that's going to come back around, right? That's the issue that's returning, and how quickly you may need to respond, right? Maybe what to try, in what order, right? How to assess for the effectiveness of your interventions and what to do if that situation escalates or if your interventions are ineffective, right? We also want to think who can help you to get the assistance that the person needs as well, right? So we're going to create a plan B for the next time. And we always just want to think, we always just want to assume this behavior is going to come back again later, right? So that we are prepared, even if it doesn't, right? Great. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look at how we can apply these 4 steps to some of the most common dementia-related behaviors. So one common behavior is the anxiety or agitation, right? So when someone with dementia is restless or pacing, right, distressed, or they're really excessively reliant on caregivers, they might be experiencing that agitation or anxiety, right? So this is the fun part of today's program. So I'm going to read an excerpt. We're going to go through an example, right? So we're going to listen to a situation involving a woman named Anne, and then we're going to explore how we can take those 4 steps that we outlined, all right, and how we can incorporate that into the situation, right? And then once we get into the example, ask some questions. You can put it in the chat and give me your feedback about this example. All right, so here we go. So here's our example number 1, right? So Anne is a 75-year-old woman with Alzheimer's disease who is pacing in the hallways in her house in the evenings saying, I need to go, I need to go. She would not stop walking even for meals. Her family would give her sandwiches to eat while she was walking. Even though she used a cane, she was getting blisters on her feet and had lost weight from not eating. Her family would ask Anne to sit down, but as soon as she sat down, she would immediately get up and start pacing again. Anne had worked for 40 years as a nurse on the night shift, and her agitation began every evening. Her shoes are worn, and she appeared to be in pain as she walked. All right, so that was our first example. So we're going to keep that situation in mind as we review these steps, right? So if you remember, the first step in understanding and addressing behaviors is again to detect and connect, right? By joining the person's reality, right? So here's where I bring it back to all of y'all. You can use the chat box. What did you detect? What are some key points in this example that we detect? What are some key details? What are some things that we noticed in this example? Open up the chat. Anything that you detected in this example with Anne? Alrighty, no worries. So we can, I'll get the discussion started, right? So oh, I think I saw a chat. Yes. Her desperation to be somewhere on time to complete a task, right? Yes. She might be feeling the need to take care of patients. The pacing and distressed look, yes, right? These are all things that we just detected, right? Kind of with the pacing, right? We're listening to Anne say that she needs to go. She has to go. I gotta go. I gotta go, right? That's something that's really, that we detected, right? So with that, now we're understanding that she's restless or anxious about something, right? Thank you. Thank you for your participation. Absolutely, right? So we detected all of this, right? She got blisters on her feet. She's saying, I gotta go, I gotta go. She's not eating, right? Great. So next we want to address those physical needs now, right? So we want to maybe address for any pain, maybe medication interactions or those medical issues, right? So for some people, right, when we do see that restlessness, right, it might be sometimes the sundowning that might be coming in, right? So sundowning is that increased difficulty and confusion towards the late afternoon and also the early evening time, right? So maybe there might be some of that, right? Again, maybe she's just not active during the daytime, right? Because again, she used to work the night shift. Maybe she's too used to, right? Maybe sleeping during the day, staying up at night, right? Maybe she needs more physical activity during the daytime so she is able to sleep during the nighttime, right? We always want to think maybe another physical issue could be maybe there is that indigestion, maybe there is constipation, maybe, it's not the thing that she wants to eat, right? We want to think about these physical needs too, right? And of course, because sometimes constipation, that might also trigger agitation, right? We want to also make sure that their diet also includes plenty of fruit and fiber, maybe make sure that they're getting enough fluids throughout the day, and also including that regular exercise too. Okay. Great. And maybe also exploring the area, right? The physical area, right? Surrounding the person, seeing if that there's any, triggered physical discomfort or stress, right? Maybe those shoes that she's wearing, it's uncomfortable. So maybe she's trying to walk away from the pain, right? So we want to really look into that as well, right? Step 3, right? Addressing the emotional needs. So again, we want to acknowledge that this person, acknowledge that you understand that the person is feeling frustrated or upset, right? And you want to help them to make them feel more comfortable, right? So maybe check to see if, something happened to upset the person. And, maybe she saw a few documents or maybe some pictures of when she used to, work the night shift with her fellow nurses, right? So now that triggered her anxiety and agitation, letting her know that, oh, she got to go to work, right? Sometimes if you can't make a change in the situation that reduces anxiety, right? Maybe we want to focus on changing the person's level of agitation by comforting or engaging them in a soothing or different activity with them, right? So for example, right, in a situation, so we know that she worked for 40 years as a nurse on night shift, right? So maybe something that we can help her to feel less anxious or agitated, right? Maybe she just needs to get to work, right? Maybe we create those mock patient documents or folders so that she has some work to do, right? Maybe we tell her, oh, your work has shifted to morning shifts now. So here are some documents that you got to do for work, right? And then we give her those mock patient folders so she could be busy and engaged, right, during the daytime, right? We can do that. Kind of play around with it, see what kind of activities we can incorporate with the individual to keep them busy and, again, addressing those emotional needs. And step 4, reassess and planning for the next time, right? So you want to think, did your new responses help, right? Do you need to explore other potential causes or solutions, right? If so, what can you do differently, right? And we're going to assume that the person will feel anxious or agitated again in the future. So we want to make a plan, right, for addressing those feelings again, right? And of course, be sure to include what to do if that situation escalates or if your interventions are starting to become more ineffective. Great. So here's another behavior, right? Confusion or suspicion, right? So when someone with Alzheimer's disease, right, is confused, they might not recognize those familiar people, places, or things, right? Now, of course, when that confusion is also accompanied by that suspicion, the person might also accuse others of stealing or even being unfaithful, right? So here we go. We're going to go back to visiting Anne again. So as she begins to experience some confusion and suspicion, we're going to go ahead and take again those 4 steps that we outlined and how we can help Anne in this situation. So here's our next example. So when Anne's family comes to visit and evening begins, she becomes very suspicious that people are trying to get into her house and are watching her through the big picture windows. She becomes suspicious of her family for not making the people go away and that they all must be in cahoots with each other. Great. So short example, but I want to say that this happens sometimes too, right? That confusion or suspicion. So here, I'm going to bring it back again to y'all. Right? Step 1 with detecting and connecting. What are we detecting from this situation? What have we seen? What have we heard from this situation? Give you some time to chat box in there. What is this confused or suspicious behavior that we're hearing about? Give it a little bit more time in the chat box. I know it took a little bit. So here we go. So some things that we've noticed from this situation could be, right, again, we know that Anne is suspicious during the evening time with the big picture windows, right? So we see that she's very suspicious, very confused about the people, right? People are trying to break into her house, right? So to kind of address those physical needs first, right? Maybe we want to check the environments for any potential sources of that confusion, right? For example, it might be that Anne sees the people outside in the neighborhood out for their nightly jog, right? And that those are the people who are trying to get into her house, right? Could be that. Maybe, for example, right, we also want to make sure that we want to rule out maybe a medical explanation, such as maybe an infection, maybe low blood sugar levels, or even delirium, right? So if the person is being given the pain medication, we also want to consult with the doctor right away about possible side effects, right? In addition, we also want to ask about potential interactions between those medications and those possible side effects as well, right? So we also, so to modify the environments too, right? If it isn't any of the medical conditions or medication interactions, right? To modify the environment, maybe an hand situation, right? Maybe it's also that she was just seeing the family's reflection in the window, right? Or again, strangers that are, taking their nightly jog, right? Maybe that could be avoided by making sure that we close the curtains each evening, right? Closing those curtains, and maybe the big picture windows were actually just reflections in a mirror, right? So maybe we could take down mirrors, or maybe if it's actually the people on the TV, right? Turning off TV at night to prevent suspicion and things that she hears from TV, right? These are all examples of kind of modifying that environment. Right. We also want to, when we are responding, we want to respond with a brief and accurate explanation, right? But we also want to avoid arguing, right? So keeping our sentences short and simple, explaining it, and maybe if, offering corrections as a gentle suggestion or answers, right? We don't want to criticize. We don't want to talk down on them, right? Offer that as, again, those gentle suggestions, right? And if you escalate your energy level, person's just going to match that, right? And it's going to increase it even further. So we also want to make sure that we address those emotional needs too. So as always, we want to briefly let the person know, you understand that they're upset, you understand that, there's, that they are confused, right? And let the person know that you will take care of the situation, right? Given the responsibility that, you will help relieve this confusion or suspicion, right? And maybe even repeating this message to a person as they begin to also calm down too, right? We also always want to remember that, yes, we have entered the person's reality, right? So let them know that you are here to help and that you are on their side as well, right? So agree, acknowledge that you understand, and apologize as needed. So for example, letting Anne know, I'm so sorry that this is happening, Anne. Let's see what we can do to fix it, right? Now, of course, don't try to take the person's confusion or behavior personally, right? I know this is very difficult, especially when you are that target of accusations. But again, remember that it is the disease causing the accusations, and it's not really an accurate reflection of that person's trust in you, right? And again, step 4, reassess and planning for next time, asking yourself whether the new response helped. Maybe you need to explore other potential causes and solutions. And of course, assume that the person will feel confused and suspicious again in the future. And we're going to make a plan addressing that. Great. So our next one is aggression. So sometimes a person with Alzheimer's or other dementia, they can experience aggressive behavior, right? Which might be verbal, physical, or both, right? So there might be a trigger for the behavior that you can identify, but there are times when it might seem to appear for just no apparent reason, right? So next, we're going to hear again from Anne and now her husband, Bill, as they deal with her incidents of aggressive behavior. And then again, we're going to explore those 4 steps again. So here we go. Our next example is Anne's husband, Bill, is standing at the back of the room, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, watching television. Anne walks in and tells him sharply, "You aren't the boss here." Bill ignores the comment and continues to watch television. Anne comes closer, raises her voice, and says, "You can't tell me what to do." When Bill doesn't respond, Anne comes up to Bill and hits him on the arm with her balled fist. Prior to her dementia symptoms, Anne was quite calm by nature and would never have exhibited this behavior. Lately, her outbursts are becoming more frequent. She continues to come at Bill, who retreats from her and locks himself in the bathroom to avoid further conflict. He does not have a cell phone with him, and since both had been avid hunters when they were younger, there are guns in the house. But Bill has removed all of the ammunition. Okay, so this one was a bit of a more extreme, more, I guess, there's a lot going on in this example, right? So here we go. We're going to go ahead and take those 4 steps. Our first step, again, detecting and connecting, right? So let me bring it back again to y'all, right? Lots to detect in this situation. What do y'all detect from this? I'll give it a little bit so I could give some time for people to chat and type. Yep, there we go. Yes, so we see aggressive behavior that escalates, absolutely, right? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, right? So there are those aggressive behaviors that we see a lot in Anne right now, right? So we always want to identify, right, the immediate trigger for the aggression, right? Maybe it's something frighten or alarm the person, right? Maybe it's not a logical response, but rather an automatic response to something that the person is perceiving, right? Again, maybe in this situation, maybe it was Bill's body language, right, with crossing his arms and standing up, right? Or maybe it was something that was said on the TV that Bill was watching that might have triggered that aggression, right? So we always want to gently say the person's name and let them know that you understand and are there to help before we attempt to intervene, right? One thing also that Bill did that shouldn't have been the case, right? He ignored her and ultimately retreated back into the bathroom, right? We don't want to ignore them. We do want to acknowledge them, right? So step 2, addressing the physical issues first, right? Again, we want to rule out any medical causes. You know, some people, they might lash out when they are in pain. So we want to limit and remove any distractions, right? Especially when we're having that conversation, maybe turning off the TV, right? And having the one-on-one conversation. Screening the environment for any obvious triggers, right? So just the excess noise, it could have been really loud noise. Maybe he was watching something violent on TV that might have triggered her, right? Maybe there's changes in the usual schedule, or maybe something that the person may have perceived as a threat. And of course, we want to make any adjustments that you can make safely, right? And be sure to protect everyone involved so that no one gets hurt, right? So you may need to ask children to leave the room or ask for additional people to provide that assistance, right? Part of your role here as a caregiver is also to ensure that everyone is safe, right? Including yourself. So then we want to also address the emotional needs. So apologize when it does seem that, it would help calm the person, right? You might be apologizing for something that, something that you didn't even do, right? But again, this apology is a reflection of the person's reality, right? Not your reality. So maybe saying, I'm sorry I made you feel that way, right? What would you like for me to do to make you feel better, right? Instead of ignoring them and retreating like Bill. We don't want to do that, right? We want to focus on feelings, not the facts. We want to be positive and reassuring, right? Let the person know again that you are there for them and that you are there to stay to help work the situation out. And again, step 4, reassessing and planning for the next time, right? Once you have settled on those interventions that are effective in calming the person and reducing the aggression, right? Again, we're going to recognize that this behavior will probably return and they might even increase in the degree, right? So again, we always want to have a plan, right? That you can avoid being taken by surprise, right? So for example, in Bill's situation, next time, maybe we keep our cell phones at all times, right? In case we have to call someone, right? For any emergency situations, right? Maybe next time also, right? We're not going to ignore her. We're going to let her know that, we're there for them. Also reassessing maybe, different weapons in the house, right? Even though there is no ammunition, right? Maybe that might be triggering something in her, right? Also, maybe it's TV, right? If it's past a certain hour, right? If we know that these aggressions are coming out during nighttime, maybe we don't watch the TVs that loudly, or we don't watch the TV. We be careful of what we watch on TV during those hours too, right? Now, of course, something also that's really important, maybe alerting neighbors about the person's condition and sometimes those anticipated behaviors, right? So that they are also, so that your neighbors are also aware, so maybe even potentially that they can help, and there's less of, misunderstanding too that can happen. Okay. Alrighty. So next we got Rose, who's going to talk about her mother who had Alzheimer's disease.
On the tough days, my husband and I would switch off. And my mom had forgotten all her English and had gone back to speaking only Greek. So she just spoke Greek, and my husband doesn't speak Greek, so it was perfect. So when she was agitated and she was cussing and yelling and saying all kinds of obnoxious things, my husband couldn't understand. So to him, it didn't matter. So when she was in that mode, we'd switch off, and he'd take her for a drive. She'd stare out the window, eat fries, and she'd be fine. And it would give me a break to really decompress from some of the stuff she was saying, that I know she was just saying them, their words, but I'm a human being as well, and I was taking them personally.
So when, of course, aggression gets dangerous, usually these behaviors associated with dementia, they might be upsetting, but oftentimes they are harmless. But of course, we know that that's not the case. That's not always the case, right? So in more rare situations, a person, they might become dangerous to themselves or to others, right? So if the person is putting themselves or other people in danger, it is really crucial to get help immediately, right? For example, having a good relationship, if you do live in an apartment, right? Maybe the super, having a good relationship with maybe the doorman, right? So that they are also aware that this is a person with Alzheimer's dementia, so that they can also help you in that situation too, right? Maybe calling 911 when you need that urgent help to contain that person's risky behavior, right? That could also be the backup plan as well, right? And of course, when you do call for any emergency services, we always want to be sure to let the dispatcher know that this is a person with Alzheimer's or another form of dementia, right? That way, it's going to ensure that the right people arrive and that they don't make the wrong assumptions, right? Great. Next, our next behavior is repetition, right? So people with Alzheimer's disease, they might repeat words, questions over and over again, or have repeating behaviors too. And of course, this can become frustrating, especially for those who have the most contact with the person. So here we go. So in this next video, we got Dr. San Fazio, who's going to address that repetition.
Repetition is really one of the most common and also frustrating behaviors for caregivers. It's important to really just take a minute, take a breath, and really think about how you could help that person with the answer that they're looking for. It really makes no sense to sort of bump heads with them and try to correct them or try to tell them to stop asking it, because they really can't remember that they just asked you that a minute ago. So thinking about how you could provide an answer that's reassuring, even though you might be doing it over and over and over again.
Just like how Dr. San Fazio said, right? So repetition, that is very common among those with dementia. Of course, it could be kind of frustrating, especially for caregivers, right? But of course, we always want to remember that we want to avoid correcting or even trying to convince the person of your viewpoint, right? And you remember that the person, you might not remember that they just asked the same question like 5 minutes ago, right? We always want to keep that in mind. Great. So next, here we have Anne's repetitive behavior. And then again, we're going to explore how we can take those 4 steps again. Right, so here's our next example. So Anne has recently been concerned about an upcoming visit from her daughter. Though her daughter Katie is not scheduled to visit for another 2 weeks, Anne has begun to repeatedly ask her husband Bill when is she going to arrive? And asks several times throughout the day, every day, which has begun to wear on Bill. He finds himself answering impatiently or even ignoring Anne's questions. And also at the same time, Anne is going into a bathroom much more frequently than she ever has before, every 10 to 20 minutes. All right. So step one is detecting and connecting, right? Again, we always want to stay calm, be patient, right? Just like we said before, we want to use the who, what, when, where, and how assessments to look for those triggers and patterns, right? So some things that we probably detected from this situation, again, right? She's asking, when is her daughter Katie coming? Every single day, with repetition with that, right? And we see that Bill is also ignoring Anne's questions at one point, right? Also, Anne is going to the bathroom a lot more frequently, right? So what does that mean, right? Now we're going to address those physical needs first, right? So as always, we want to look for pain, right? In this situation, she's going to the bathroom a lot more frequently. That could be a UTI, a urinary tract infection, right? We see that they are going to the bathroom every 10 to 20 minutes. It's time that we go ahead and call the medical professional and see what's going on, right? So we always want to look for the pain first, any unusual, changes in their behaviors too. We always want to, have that conversation with the physician or a medical specialist, right? Exploring the physical environment for any triggers, right? Might be also that it's because he's ignoring her questions, right? She just wants to answer. And to kind of help with the repetition too, something that we can do is, again, writing things down for the person, maybe even having a very big calendar on maybe the refrigerator door or the bathroom door, right? Circling that date in red, Katie is coming this day, right? We give them the visual reminders too, right? So that can really help, especially with repetition, right? Because we write things down, then they see it, they're like, oh, wait, oh, yes, right? Maybe doing that. Excuse me. Then step 3, addressing emotional needs. Again, focus on the emotion that the person is exhibiting, right? Whether it be the anxiety, frustration, overstimulation, etc., right? We want to say something that recognizes that emotional state and then that will help you to move to the next step in that intervention, right? Again, maybe the emotion behind the behavior might be feeling the repetition, right? So maybe she's just really excited, right? She can't contain her excitement. Or maybe on the flip side, right? She's anxious that her daughter's coming, right? Want to keep that in mind. Again, we don't want to ignore them. Briefly answering the person's questions or even addressing the concerns, right? That might just be enough, right? Repeat the same answer to help that person, right, who might be processing your words slowly and they just really can't retain them, right? That might help. And of course, like I said, using memory aids like notes, photos, or calendars. That might help for some people. And of course, we also want to keep in mind too, repetition is a part of the disease, right? Sometimes to help redirect their focus, right? If we do see that a lot of repetition, maybe engaging the person in a more purposeful activity, right? To keep their mind off of that. That could also help, right? With the repetition as well. Great. And also turning the action or behavior, right? Into an activity with a more positive focus. So for example, maybe more of a repetitive activity, right? Like wiping the countertops, folding the towels, right? Sorting the laundry by color, right? These are all repetitive activities that can also help alleviate that repetition too. So let's think about for sure. It's really kind of how we're going to do the detective work of what's going to work for my mom or my dad with Alzheimer's with dementia, right? Then of course, step 4, reassessing and planning for the next time. Same thing, ask yourself if this new response worked. Do we need to explore any possible causes or solutions? Do we need to go see a doctor? All right. And of course, expect that this repetition is going to happen again and again, and to have a plan. Great. So our next behavior is wandering, right? So at some point in the course of the disease, we do see that approximately that there's 60% of people with Alzheimer's disease or other forms of dementia who will wander, right? And this behavior, it might take place without warning. So many families, they are not prepared for this, right? But after hearing this example, we will be prepared, right? So here's our next example with Anne and Bill. Anne and Bill spent the early years of their marriage in New Jersey. They moved out of the state to their current home 30 years ago. Anne constantly asks to visit New Jersey, and she frequently leaves the house in the morning while Bill is showering and states, "I'm going to New Jersey." She has been found by neighbors on many occasions at their church, on neighborhood streets, and one time at a very busy intersection near their home. Their daughter Katie is worried about potential injury. Bill is also worried and is at loss about what to do. Bill is logical and tries to explain to Anne the reasons why they can't visit New Jersey, though he recognizes that this approach is not working. This approach also tends to make Anne more angry, and the wander incidence increases at those times. All right. So with this situation, Anne's situation of wandering, right? Again, we're going to detect and connect, right? So we detect that Anne really wants to go back to New Jersey, right? She says she's going to go, right? She's been found on many times by neighbors at different places. Again, one time at a very dangerous intersection, right? So again, we want to see what's going on, detecting and connecting for that. Step 2, addressing physical issues first. As always, we want to look for pain, any signs of pain first, right? Sometimes wandering begins because they're trying to attempt to move away from the pain, right? So if the change is sudden, you do want to consult the person's doctor for that assessment, right? Checking to see maybe if the person might be reacting to a change or if there's difficulty with something in their immediate surroundings too, right? We want to assess for that, right? Have there been any changes in the person's maybe patterns of exercise, physical activity, or maybe there's a change in their daily routine lately, right? Oftentimes, maybe a person might be responding to the unmet need, which includes hunger, thirst, maybe going to the bathroom, right? Having that desire to get away from something or someone unpleasant, right? A desire to go home. Maybe they just want to go outside or engage with others, right? They want to talk with other people, right? Besides the same people that they've always been talking to, right? Want to make any changes needed to really help keep that person safe as you continue that assessment, right? So maybe with the situation with Anne, right? Maybe there's something unpleasant in her current home that might make her want to go back to New Jersey, or maybe there's something missing in her current home that was in their home back when she was in New Jersey, right? Again, step 3, we want to address the emotional needs. Is the person feeling bored or understimulated, right? Maybe naming the feelings that you pick up on from the person. Maybe we could say, something as simple as, you seem very sad, or you seem very scared, right? Then providing the reassurance that you are safe and that you are together, right? We always want to plan ahead, especially ahead of any wandering incidents, and we also want to put a plan in place, right? So if possible, help the person do what they want, right? So if they want to go outside, grab your coats and go with them for a walk or for a drive, right? If it's not possible, maybe agree and also delay, right? So for example, you might say, right, yeah, sure, a walk, that could be great. but it's almost time for lunch, right? Is it okay if we go after lunch, right? Want to explain that to them. Also creating opportunities for safe wandering, right? Maybe an enclosed garden or, a circular walkway, right? We want to give them some time to pace back and forth, right? Maybe that's all they really want. They want to stretch out their legs, right? Maybe even suggesting doing something physical together, especially when the person is typically the most restless too, right? Also, some ideas that I've heard from caregivers, when changing the person's surroundings that can help reduce that risk of wandering. Some ideas are that they put dark mats in front of the doors that can make it look like holes, which the person might actually avoid, right? They might also camouflage those doors and the door jambs, sometimes by painting the same color as the walls, right? Or they might even just hang different, clothing or towels above the doorknobs to kind of disguise it, so it's out of sight, out of mind, kind of thing, right? Lots of different things they can do. Again, got to do that detective work of what can I do? How's it going to be most relatable to this person, right? Also providing a structured routine for the day, right? Offer things for the person to plan on, right, throughout the day, and that might alleviate some of the boredom, right? That might be triggering the wandering behavior, right? Lots of things that we can do. And again, we want to plan and reassess for the next time, see what we can do, see what worked, and always assume that it might or will come again in the future. Great. So here we go. So next we got Beverly, who's going to talk about her husband with Alzheimer's disease and wandering.
Later in this journey, and I call it a journey, he decided that he was going home to his wife. And one New Year's Eve, he looked out the window and there was a house down the street that had all the lights on, and he decided that that was his house. And it must have been, I'd say, at least 2 below zero. And he was going to leave. I had a double lock on the door, but I had left the key in, and he decided he was leaving. And I said, well, Amos, I'm your wife. No, you're not. My wife is waiting for me. And he would laugh when I said that I was his wife. So he got up and I said, Amos, I'm going to call the police if you walk out the door. And Amos, in his usual manner, said, you do what you have to do. And he walked out the door. Well, he walked out in his house shoes 2 blocks down the street, and I got in the car and drove around. It just so happened that it was a neighbor's mother, and she knew what was happening, and she talked to him, and we got him back in the car and drove him home.
So most of the time, right, the wandering is a part of the person's disease and not due to a medical issue, but also, again, it could be also the medication issue too, right? So we always want to explore, is this just part of the disease, or is it because of due to a new medication, right? So we always want to explore different options. And of course, unlike most situations involving wandering, right, Beverly actually saw her husband go and knew exactly where he went, right? But if you don't see the person with dementia leave, we just don't know where they went, right? You should always have a backup plan, maybe having like the Find My iPhone, right? Or having a medical alert bracelet to let them know where they are, and also calling any emergency services to make sure that we get that person back home as safe and fast as possible, right? Great. So here at the Alzheimer's Association, we have many different great resources. So our big resource is our website at alz.org. That's where you can find all these different services on the screen that you see right now, including our Alzheimer's Navigator, our Community Resource Finder, which is in collaboration with AARP. The Community Resource Finder, I want to highlight that one, is a really great resource because you can input a zip code and you can find the nearest resources to that zip code, right? So if you put a zip code, you can find the nearest geriatrician, nearest physician, home health aid agencies, maybe long-term care facilities, et cetera, right? So definitely want to highlight that. And also our ALZ Connected, Alzheimer's Dementia Caregiver Center and Safety Center too, right? Also on our website, you can find our support groups, education programs, and free online education programs like today's. And also a very big resource I would like to highlight is 24/7 helpline, right? 1-800-272-3900. So that is 24/7. It's available all day, every day. You can get connected with mass level clinicians, care consultants, and also different social workers as well to really talk with them one-on-one, confidentially, right? About creating an action plan for the person. I've seen this behavior in my loved one with dementia. How can I go about this? Right, getting advice for that. If you just need emotional support, we're also there for that as well, right? Or if you just need to find the nearest resource too, definitely utilize that 24/7 helpline as well. Again, that's 1-800-272-3900. And different ways to get involved at the association. So, volunteering, we have the longest day, and also Trial Match too. Trial Match is really a great resource. It's free to use. Helps you to match, as the title says, it helps you to match with clinical trials involved with dementia and Alzheimer's and advancing that research. Right? And it's open for those who, maybe with the disease or without the disease, right? It's really open for everyone. Right? So definitely check that out, alz.org/trialmatch. And then the Walk to End Alzheimer's is actually tomorrow in Manhattan. For those who are in the city, in New York City, we have them all over, but the one in Manhattan is tomorrow. It's one of my favorite events just because it's a day where all the different caregivers and people who are fighting for this cause are just gathered in one place. Lots to do. You can do care consultations right then and there. You can visit the programs table where I'll be tomorrow. There's also like the Promise Flower Garden, and it's just really fun. So definitely check that out as well. And that is it. So I will open up for any questions, Q&A, and feel free to share in the chat or the Q&A button. Also, I will be sending out the different handouts that normally come with this program. So I'll be sending them over, and Natalia will be sending those to y'all.
Perfect. Let's see, do we have any questions at this time? While you will work on probably putting those in the chat box or the Q&A box. Just want to remind you all that we have one more session with Joon on Monday, October 30th at 10 a.m. You can definitely check out the website at the events page to sign up. And obviously look for that follow-up email where you'll have all the information that he will send out. All right. Well, if there are no further questions, Joon, just want to thank you so much again for spending your morning with us, for sharing this information and training with us. And to our attendees, thank you so much for joining. And we look forward to seeing you hopefully Monday the 30th for the following session with you. All righty. You all have a great weekend, and we'll see each other soon.